Flour is the product obtained by grinding wheat kernels or berries. The kernel consists of three distinct parts: bran, the outer covering of the grain; germ, the embryo contained inside the kernel; and endosperm, the part of the kernel that makes white flour during milling. The three parts are separated and recombined to achieve different types of flours. This has no effect on the nutrient and/or vitamin value. There are 6 different classes of wheat: hard red wheat, hard red spring, soft red winter, hard white, soft white, and durum. The end products are determined by the wheat characteristics, especially protein and gluten content. The harder the wheat, the higher the protein content in the flour. Soft, low-protein wheats are used in cakes, pastries, cookies, crackers, and oriental noodles. Hard, high-protein wheats are used in breads and quick breads. Durum is used in pasta and egg noodles.
While at least some wheat in the United States and Canada is planted in the spring and harvested in the summer, much is planted in the late fall and harvested in the spring. Winter wheat manages to survive freezing temperatures and being buried under piles of snow. How do these plants pull it off? After being planted in the mid to late fall, winter wheat seedlings undergo a process called cold acclimation. They begin to grow and poke through the soil as the temperature drops to around 48 degrees Fahrenheit. As the plant's leaves absorb light, the seedlings produce large amounts of carbon and store it in the crown, the part of the plant where root and shoot meet underground. At the same time, the absorption of light combined with low temperatures triggers the expression of certain genes that help the plant tolerate freezing temperatures. Although scientists do not fully understand precisely how this process works, it's clear that carbon production and freezing tolerance are necessary for the plant's survival. When the snow melts and temperatures rise again in the spring, the plant has plenty of stored energy for steady growth. By mid-spring, many North American wheat fields are beautiful with waves of grain ready for harvest. This moment of science came from Indiana University with underwriting from the Office of the Vice President for Research. Today's program was prepared by Jeremy Shear with help from Norm Huner at the University of Western Ontario. For a moment of science, I'm Yael Cassander.
So the trick of the miller is to separate those three components out: the bran, the outer layer of the wheat; the endosperm, which is the white floury bit in the middle, which is used to make white flour; and the wheat germ, which is the embryo of the grain. That's where the wheat will sprout from and to produce a new plant. We make lots of different flours on this site. We make flours for noodles, for biscuits, for bread. You name it, we make it. So the first thing that happens when the wheat comes from the farm, it arrives at the mill and we have to weigh it on the weigh bridge, and the wheat is sampled by a probe, and that sample is brought here into the laboratory, into this bucket, where it's tested for things like moisture, protein, cleanliness, hardness. But ultimately, the most important test is how it bakes up in the bakery. After it's been cleaned, we condition it, which means adding water to the grain to toughen the bran layers, the outer part of the wheat, and soften the inside of the wheat. That's really important for when the wheat goes onto the mill. The miller will then make a grist, which is the various different types of wheat needed to make a certain type of flour. So that's blended together, and it's milled on a roller system. Steel rollers break open the grain and release the white endosperm, which is where the white flour comes from. The bran is treated separately to ensure that all the white endosperm, the floury, starchy part, is taken away from the bran so that it can be ground up hard and sieved to make flour. At the end of the process, white flour is produced, and if you want to make wholemeal, we put that bran and the wheat germ back into the flour stream. After the flour's been milled, it's packed out into bags ready for delivery to the bakers. Flour is nutritionally very good for us. It's got B vitamins, vitamins and calcium for bones, and protein for good growth. So it's a very nutritious food.
Wheat facts. Wheat is a member of the grass family that produces a dry, one-seeded fruit commonly called a kernel. Humans gathered the seeds of plants and ate them. After rubbing off the husks, early people simply chewed the kernels raw, parched or simmered. Wheat originated in the cradle of civilization in the Tigris and Euphrates River Valley near what is now Iraq. The Roman goddess Ceres, who was deemed protector of the grain, gave grains their common name today, cereal. Wheat was first planted in the United States in 1777 as a hobby crop. In the United States, 1 acre of wheat yields an average of 37.1 bushels of wheat. The state of Kansas is the largest wheat producer in the United States. Dakota is a close second. Kansas is number 1 in flour milling in the United States. Kansas produces enough wheat each year to bake 36 billion loaves of bread, and enough to feed everyone in the world, over 6 billion people, for about 2 weeks. An acre of Kansas wheat produces enough bread to feed nearly 9,000 people for 1 day. 1 bushel of wheat contains approximately 1 million individual kernels. There is approximately 16 ounces of flour in 1.5 pound loaf of bread. A 1.5 pound loaf of commercial bread contains 24 slices. Before 1930, bread was sliced the old-fashioned way, by hand. The first bagel rolled into the world in 1683 when the baker from the Vienna, Austria, was thankful to the King of Poland for saving Austria from Turkish invaders. The baker reshaped the local bread so that it resembled the king's stirrup. The new bread was called Bagel, derived from the German word stir-up, Bugel. The traditional bagel is the only bread product that is boiled before it is baked. Prepackaged bagels first became available in grocery stores in the 1950s. In 1960, the frozen bagel made its introduction, and consumers had access to bagels even if they didn't live near a bakery. To revive several-day-old bagels, microwave very briefly, 15 seconds, or moisten with water and bake for 10 minutes in a 350-degree oven, or simply toast them. Never refrigerate bagels or any bread products. Bread products go stale up to 6 times faster in the refrigerator. Leave at room temperature or freeze. A bushel of wheat makes about 42 pounds of pasta, or 210 servings of spaghetti. If you eat pasta 3 times a week, it would take 70 weeks to eat all the pasta made from 1 bushel of durum. Durum wheat is used to make pasta because of its hard nature, which produces a firm cooked product. Semolina is coarsely ground durum. with a texture somewhat like sugar. It is the best product for pasta. Spaghetti was the #1 pasta sold in the United States in 1998, with elbow macaroni coming in second. There are more than 600 pasta shapes produced worldwide. In
I'm Sue Walker, and I'm going to show you how to make wheat bread. This recipe will make 3 small loaves or 2 large loaves. The ingredients we'll be using are active dry yeast, whole wheat flour, shortening, sugar, salt, milk, and water. The first step is to dissolve the dry yeast in warm, tepid water and a little sugar. Tepid water is water that is warmer than lukewarm, but not real hot to the touch. When you see the yeast mixture start to foam, then you'll know that the yeast is working, and you can continue with your recipe. The next step is to put 2 1/4 cups of water and 3/4 cup of milk into a saucepan, put it on the stove, and heat it to scalding. Scalding means that when the milk foams around the edge of the pan, it's scalded, but you don't want to boil it. After the water and milk is scalded, add 6 tablespoons of shortening, 6 tablespoons of sugar, and 3 teaspoons of salt. Mix that together until it's melted, and then put it aside to cool. After your mixture is cooled to lukewarm, then you can add the yeast mixture. You add the yeast, and then you stir it together. Okay, we're ready to add our flour. We're going to use 7 cups of flour, 4 cups of which will be whole wheat flour, and 3 cups will be regular white flour. Mix in enough flour until it's too thick to stir. When your dough is too thick to stir, you'll want to turn it out onto your surface. I recommend using the roll pot. Before putting your dough onto the roll pot, you'll want to put the rest of your flour into the middle of your surface, and then pour your dough into the flour. And using your hands, you'll want to knead that flour into your dough, and you just keep kneading and kneading and kneading until the flour is gone. And when your dough is elastic and not sticky to your hands and not sticking to the surface, then it's ready. If it's not, you'll want to add a little bit more flour until you get that right consistency. Before you form the loaves, you'll take the dough that you just kneaded and put it into a large greased bowl. Cover it with a clean cloth and put it into a warm place and let it rise till double. Sometimes it'll take up to 90 minutes. After it's risen to double, you take your fist and you punch it down. Now you're ready to form your loaves. Take your bread pans and you spray it with cooking spray, some kind of a baking spray, and then you take your dough and you divide it into either 2 or 3 sections, depending on if you want large loaves or small loaves. Using your hands, you take the dough and you form it into a long roll to fit the pan. After you've formed your loaves, you will let rise until it's double or into the shape you want. After it's risen, you take a toothpick and very gently poke a few holes down the middle of the bread. Make sure that the holes are only 1/4 inch deep, because you don't want to punch the bread down again. This will help vent the bread so that you won't get air bubbles. Make sure the pans are in the middle rack, and you want to bake them for approximately 30 minutes or until golden brown on top. Take your bread out of the oven and let it set for about 1 minute. And once you have the bread out, you'll want to brush the top with a little butter. Let the bread completely cool before you cut it. And that is how you make wheat bread.
You've all seen fans at football stadiums do the wave, right?
But that's everywhere else. This is Kansas, and we wave the wheat. All across Kansas, there are a lot of wheat fields, and there's a lot of wind, which cause those golden grains to gently sway back and forth and back and forth.
At KU, we wave the wheat at crucial moments. For example, when the football team scores or a basketball opponent fouls out, Jayhawks in the stadium lift their arms up over their heads and slowly wave them back and forth.
From a distance, this looks like a field of Kansas wheat swaying in a prairie breeze. No one is certain when this tradition first started, but it's up to you to keep this tradition alive.